Hello and welcome to Cast Iron, a podcast all about rock and metal. My name is Alan Williamson and I'm joined as always by Lewis Clark.
Hello, hello.
And today we have a very special treat for you. We are covering a black metal album, which is Emperor's Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk. So, top of the show, a little bit of housekeeping is that hopefully by the time you listen to this, we'll have a new website. And whenever we set up Cast Iron, we very questionably set up a Tumblr.
Yeah.
And that has created what I think I would call technical debt. And we have had 4 years of pain, which involves everything from manual RSS feeds to not having permanent links.
Yeah.
And it's getting to the point where every time I publish a new episode, and I put the RSS feed into the feed checker, it goes, this doesn't look right. Are you sure about this? Where are the URLs? So we have a new home at castironshow.co.uk, lovely spangly website, and you can go check that out. You probably don't know that if you've just got the podcast in your feed subscriber, but it is there. And I think we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years, and we thought, we obviously still want to continue doing this. We still love doing it, but let's give it the home on the web that it deserves.
Absolutely.
So it's a new base going forwards, and I guess I should probably also apologise to you, since I was like, yeah, let's do it over lockdown, and I was like, oh my god, I can't face anything.
Hey, look, it's important to look after yourself, bud. So absolutely makes sense.
Like, I think it's whenever we started the whole, I don't want this to turn into yet another coronavirus, because there's plenty of coronavirus podcasts. I've recorded two. Yeah, I've recorded 2 split screen coronavirus themed ones, and you can get all the Boris Johnson bashing in there. But I think whenever it began, we didn't really know how long it was going to go on for.
Yeah.
And at the time of recording, it is the end of September.
Yeah.
Lockdown has kind of eased in the UK, but things aren't looking very good. And in Australia, people are... It's on a knife edge, I think, is the euphemistic mainstream media term.
Yeah.
So we started off, I was all right, I'm going to do lots of things to try and improve myself. And that went okay. I learned to touch type, which has been really useful.
Yep.
But then after a while, you just get a bit deflated, and March turned into June, turned into August, and it's been difficult.
Yeah.
So for me, I've spent the past couple of months trying to focus on making sure I nailed things professionally and taking proper rest at the end of that time, which is so difficult whenever you're working from home and then you finish and you're still at home.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling much better.
That's
and
good.
We're going to try and commit. Well, I'm not going to tell you, dear listener, how often we're going to try and commit to recording a podcast, because that means that we won't do it. So we'll keep it a mystery. I will see if we commit to the secret guidelines that we have set for ourselves. But generally, I'm feeling pretty good. I had the most anticlimactic birthday of all time. And my birthday cards are still coming in from the UK, even though it was a week ago. How have you been? How are you tracking?
Yeah, been fine. I think the thing I'm really happy with in regards to this episode is we finally hit 20, Alan. This is our 20th episode.
Was this episode 20?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We absolutely got there.
I should know what episode number it is, because I've spent so much time trying to fix that RSS feed.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Fucking names of the... Oh, yeah, I should say, this podcast is now marked as explicit in iTunes. We've finally given up.
Good stuff.
That doesn't mean it's going to be sweary. Given the nature of the album content, it's easier for me to just flag the thing at the top.
Oh, absolutely. I think it comes with the territory, because, this is our first black metal release, eh?
So are you a black metal fan? Or would you say you're in any way familiar with black metal?
So only more recently, to be honest with you. So I probably got into black metal in the last 3 years, probably. And it's mainly through... well, let's talk about black metal first, because if I talk about the way I got into it, it's going to be a bit of a backwards way of doing things. So black metal as a genre, I suppose, is stylistically recognizable via underproduced sound, it often has a lack of bass, heavy use of blast beat drumming, and tremolo pick guitar playing.
Screamy vocals.
Yeah, very screamy.
Shrieky vocals.
Absolutely, that's the style. Higher pitched, raspy, sort of screamed vocals. And it's often associated with theatrical sort of corpse paint. And
we need to get our we need to tell everybody our black metal band member names. So
okay, so from here on,
so for this episode, you're only allowed to refer to me as a Deathbear, and you're going to be Hellyoda.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Deathbear.
So Hellyoda. So we're talking about the origins of black metal, and
Yeah.
I did a bit of listening around, obviously, as part of this, and I think that the name for the genre comes from the Venom album and associated song Black Metal, which is interesting because that is both a thrash song and it has lyrics that I think could be a manifesto for this podcast if you haven't seen them before. I guess the genre came out of thrash, and it came out of the new wave of British heavy metal to some extent. So bands like Judas Priest, and Merciful Fate, and aforementioned Venom.
Definitely.
So it is kind of thrashy, but it also is more extreme. And it's the first wave of what's called black metal, and it almost sounds more like that priesty speed metal with shrieking. And then there's this wave of Norwegian and Scandinavian bands, and that's where all the corpse paint and the Satanism comes in, essentially.
Yeah, so that's another thing that's quite often associated with black metal is some pretty negative stuff. So church burnings.
The church burning.
And unfortunately, there's quite a large subset of fascist bands that frequent
white supremacy.
So
I think we're not gonna name names. We're not gonna do Burzum recommendations here because I think white supremacy probably gets enough of an airing in the press these days. That's contributing
absolutely.
to it. So we're gonna very tactfully focus on what we want to cover. But whenever people talk about heavy metal, especially people who haven't listened to much metal before, right? And you think about all the scared American parents of the 1980s worried about things like Metallica and Slayer and stuff. This is probably what they should have been worried about. Is black metal would not have taken off in the States. Nobody was up for Satanism and cross burning.
Absolutely
not. And probably that trend continues to this day. There's an interesting thing recently that Apple Music, Apple Music, obviously Spotify competitor, pretty popular now. It's very big in like hip hop and pop music, and they've just started a second radio show. So their first one was called Beats One. That's called Apple Music One. It's good. It's good, interesting shows. Even like Corey Taylor from Slipknot does a show. And things. So they've started their second radio station, and it is country music.
Great fun.
So that's why I say black metal would never take off there, because it's all Jesus and steers and beer and So this is quite the opposite. But I think this is probably what your parents warned you about when it came to metal.
Absolutely. But so coming back round to how I got into black metal, it was mainly through a current wave of sort of anti-fascist black metal that's really taken off at the moment. There are 3 bands in particular that I'm very much into: Underdark, Dawn Raid, and the wonderfully named Neckbeard Death Camp, who, by the way, you could literally just read like album titles and song titles and it's just entertaining enough as it is. They have an album called White Nationalism is for Basement Dwelling Losers. So yeah, great band. I do like a bit of just turning it around, taking the genre back and making it into a positive thing. So yeah, it's
are
very
those
much
British. Are those British bands? Where's that?
So Underdark and Dawn Raid are British. Neckbeard Death Camp are reportedly from France, but I think they're very much actually Americans. But yeah. So yeah, it's just a big sort of antagonistic, taking the mick out of National Socialist black metal, or NSBM, which is what the term usually is used for the fascist stuff, which kind of largely stems from Burzum. So yeah.
Yeah, luckily we picked an album that doesn't really have that kind of connection to it.
Well, yeah, not
A little bit in the Mayhem connection.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a Mayhem connection, obviously. We should probably talk about Mayhem, probably one of the most infamous black metal bands of all time. Euronymous, the guitarist from Mayhem, was murdered by his bandmate Varg Vikernes, who went on to form Burzum. There is some absolutely crazy stories about them. Stuff like Varg, taking teeth. No, it was Euronymous taking teeth from the previous vocalist who committed suicide after he, blew his head off, and used fragments of teeth to give to people he deemed worthy. One of them recently was sold in auction. There's some really dark stuff in black metal, guys. It's a bit strange. But yeah, Mayhem are definitely a episode all unto themselves, I think, but very much a heavy hitter when it comes to Scandinavian black metal. And Euronymous himself does make a posthumous appearance on this record, but we'll get to that as we approach it. Today's album is Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk by Emperor, and it is a 1997 release from Candlelight Records. Very early release for them as well.
Will we get straight into it?
Yeah.
It's a very so I don't have a lot of familiarity with this, and I'm very sorry to my brother Paul, who's he recommended this one. He's the black metal master, and I think that this Emperor album was probably one of the table names at his wedding. If not, he certainly had Immortal on there. It's not something I'm not familiar with, and when we get to the recommendations later, I've got some adjunct black metal album type things that I have listened to and like. But where it comes from, I've got my Nea Bliviscaris t-shirt on today, so I'm more of an extreme and mellow death fan. But I have seen Abbott live, who is the former frontman of Immortal.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But it was one of the strangest gigs I've ever been to, where he was obviously really drunk and not into it, and was actually really disappointing.
I think he went into rehab last year, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you'd been to that gig, you wouldn't be surprised. So this was all totally new to me.
Yes, and I've got to say as well, it was to me.
Sat down to listen to this, and so usually the way I listen to these things for cast down is I'll either put them on when I'm working out, or if I am working.
Yeah,
and this is not something that I can really give my full concentration to, either while working or working out. There's a very sad story where my dog ate my workout headphones, and he chewed up the tips that actually fit my ears.
Oh no!
So I didn't really have much of a bass response from my gym earphones anymore. So I was listening to this, and I was like, "Does this have bass? Does this have drums?"
No, there's not a lot of bass in this.
So there's not a lot, but I'd still prefer to listen to it with some quality headphones. So I finally found a good way to listen to this, but I'll cover that at the end.
Yep.
So I sat down and to the first track, which is, I'm just going to call it The Oath.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea how that's meant to be pronounced.
Alsvartir or something like that, probably.
So this one is properly moody and creepy intro with screams in the background, quite a doomy bass sound. But quite a bit of melody to it. It's really like a Hammer horror soundtrack. Isn't it?
Absolutely. And like you say, it's basically an introduction, but it's quite a long one actually. It's basically sort of lots of atmospheric, creepy, like guitar noodling, breathy sort of vocals to create this sort of weird mood. And it just sort of lasts for about 4 minutes.
It reminds me a little of Opeth at times.
Yeah,
who I know are not a black metal. Well, I guess their very, very early stuff has some influences, but it's got a similar kind of. I think it's probably like Scandinavian chord progression type thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of those bands are influenced by that Scandi folk music. I think that's where it's coming in.
Definitely.
But so and I'm not a massive fan of intro tracks, but this one was okay because it's massive build up, and then you eventually get farty MIDI synth noises.
Around 3 minutes 39.
Yeah. I was going, what is going on? Is this power metal?
Yeah.
Like, is this?
So I have seen.
It just came out of nowhere. So...
Absolutely, it is the silliest, cheesiest sort of like Rhapsody style synth that I wasn't expecting it at all. So this album has been described as symphonic black metal, and I think it mainly comes from this use of keyboard and synthesizers. Gives it a little bit more texture, gives it a little bit more bombast, and but it's so strange because you have this large, creepy, atmospheric intro, and then stupid synth, and then the moment it finishes,
you get Nintendo 64 MIDI. Coming
yeah,
in.
Exactly. But yeah, the moment it finishes,
there's another track. There's another track that I think is good, particularly symphonic bits, and we can talk a bit about I guess weaknesses with the album, but it's something that like a lot of these albums at the time people didn't really do. Live orchestral music recorded and mixed in with metal. So that's what makes it have that slightly dated sound. If anything,
definitely.
Because it's good for a laugh, but it's probably not what they were going for at the time.
No, absolutely. They've obviously just composed it, electronically because that's the limitations of what they had to deal with. Because I'm sure it's all recorded on a budget, probably in a bedroom or something. But I think, if it was recorded in a studio, it would have been done like digitally. So, but
you probably have more budget for your recordings than these guys did. But that's part of the sound, is that it is that lo-fi raw sound is very much a part of it. So then we get on to the first real track, which is Ye Entrance Imperium. And then you find very quickly, I see. No, it is not. It's not power metal. It's not power metal at all, is it?
Alan, what did you think of this?
So we went to visit the in-laws yesterday. On the way back, I said to Jess, I'd really like to give this Emperor album another blast before we record it tomorrow. And I think we lasted about two tracks. You're like, this isn't driving music. I'm done. So this is nuts. There's some serious blast beats going on throughout. We've got screaming, a bit of synth, some orchestral swells, sort of coming and going like waves, and it's almost like a hardcore punk rocky kind of sound compared to what we usually cover.
So
I could understand why you'd be like rubbing your hands with glee. But I don't know. It probably, I'd say it wasn't really what I was expecting.
No. The first time I listened to this was my first introduction to Emperor as well. I've had no experience with them outside of, knowing who they were and their influence on the genre and just knowing the name essentially. So this blew my fucking balls off. I was having the best time when I heard this. I sat down to listen to this earlier in the week, just had an evening free, and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to open up a text document and listen to this front to back and make some notes, and it's just having the best time. Oh god. So this is just unrelenting, so chaotic, just blast beats the entire time. All the black metal tropes are in here. No bass, raspy screams, loads of reverb, just speed, tremolo picking. We get the cheesy synth comes in again.
Yes,
it's just so much fun. 2:57, we get a fucking guitar solo. Oh, it's just so good. And
there's a bit of a proggy shift around the 3:30 mark, and I don't really know what it reminded me of. I had written in my notes, I want to say early Anathema, but that is not quite right.
Yeah.
But it was more of a doomy kind of a feel, and there are doomy moments in this, especially in the bonus tracks we may or may not talk about.
Yeah.
Quite. I think this album front loads the black metal tropes.
Yeah.
I think it's more intense at the beginning. And then as we go through it, it becomes a bit more melodic and even more groovy and ballady.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
I think
mean,
it really front loads the intensity. So this track is a all out sonic assault,
yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. Oh man, and I've got to say as well, like regardless of the fact that the production values are quite low and obviously the bass is quite lacking, I enjoyed the production. Actually, I thought it was quite clear for a black metal record.
Yeah, I think it's actually all right. And again, you need to have. The thing with this album is the first time I listened, it's like, oh, what the fuck is this? And I think this is the other part of the reason why it took us so long to record a new episode, because I would often put stuff on the background while I'm working, but this is just like background noise.
Yeah.
This kind of music is, you have to sit down and listen to it properly, and you have to have the right listening environment. You can't put it on in the car. You can't put it on when you're going for a run. You can't put it on when you're working on something because it doesn't have that traditional verse, chorus, verse structure.
Yeah.
So in order to follow it and really make sense of what's going on, you need to be, as the Americans would say, fully cognizant of what's going on within the... They always say cognizant rather than like aware. Why use two syllables when three will do? But it's something I think you really need to fully commit to, and that's why, as a genre, it does have that barrier to it, because anybody can listen to even like thrash music and have a bit of a bounce because it's got a verse chorus verse structure. The song black metal has a chorus with the words black metal going on, right? But this doesn't. So it's not introductory level metal, and unless you're going to take the time and the effort to commit to it, I imagine it would just go right over most people's heads.
Yeah.
It certainly went right over my head until I was like, right, no, if we're going to cover this for the podcast, I'm going to have to treat it seriously rather than just shrugging my shoulders in every track.
Yeah.
One, because that doesn't make for an interesting episode, and two, because it's a podcast, so nobody can see the shrugging.
Yeah, no, it's big arms folded, watching in silence, sort of listening. You can't mosh to this because, quite frankly, it's too fast.
Yeah.
I'm
trying to think what people did at the Abath gig. I think they probably did just fold their arms and
watch
nod
and appreciate. Yeah,
there's always people moshing regardless of whether it's coordinated or not, right?
I mean, there's certainly moments on this record where a groove hits, or there's a moodier change in tone which allows for a bit more movement, I guess. But the movement in Ye Entrance Imperium is basically very quick. I really, really enjoyed this. I was just proper blown away by how quickly it went from the intro being creepy and atmospheric and moody to silly and cheesy and synthy to then absolutely chaotic and mental. It's just
and it's quite a short album. It's just under 45 minutes. So it gets in and out.
Absolutely,
there.
Yeah. There was no.
That's one of the things about it. Even though the song structures are almost what you would call proggy, the song lengths are really quite in and out. There's nothing particularly long.
Absolutely.
So the next track is "Thus Spake the Night Spirit." And again, it's frantic blast beat vibes. There's some mad guitar work in here.
Oh.
And because you're the one that cuts in the audio clips, we need to get in the twiddly bridge bit before the kind of chorus. It goes, which is great. It's like a crazy Scandinavian hoedown.
Again, I loved how the synth keyboard kicks this off again and makes it sound like a power metal song or something. It's just so OTT. It's just so silly, and then it takes itself so seriously and just goes completely crazy with the speed and the blast beats and all the tremolo picking again. Oh, I love it so much.
It's on the right side of pompous.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a genuine sincerity there. Because obviously it's black metal, it's going to be deeply sincere the entire time because everybody takes themselves deadly serious. But it's just, I love that marriage and that juxtaposition of this sounds very daft, but you are playing it so straight, and I respect that.
Yeah, I think that's what you want. Like,
Yeah.
You know, you don't want everything to be like I don't know, Steel Panthery. Not everything can be a parody. And it's good as long as they take their craft seriously. That's fine.
I think as well this song, about 3 minutes 16, I've noted, was it sort of moves into a slower, sort of moodier change in tone, which helps sort of break it up a little bit, so that it's not just a 5-minute bombardment of blast beats, which are really respected as well. That was helpful, because this is pretty intense, this record. It doesn't really let up an awful lot of times, so when it does, I think it's kind of needed, because you literally just can't take a breather. It's one of those, like we've already said, you have to sit down and give it your attention, because there's just so much going on at any given point. So when you get a moment of respite to just sort of enjoy a slower sort of change in pace, it's really appreciated, and you get a moment like that in this. So I mean, it goes back to being absolutely chaotic after a little bit, but at least
I think
you
this
get
is
that.
where the symphonic bits are really interesting.
Absolutely.
Because as you say, they break things up, they give it a bit more variety, and they give it more of a musical depth, I want to say.
Absolutely.
That you wouldn't necessarily get if it was just guitars and shrieking. And I think if this had just been 40 minutes of guitars and shrieking, we would have struggled a bit.
Yeah.
Because some of the albums and things I've listened around, like I've enjoyed bands like Immortal more. I think, where there's more of a death metal crunch and more of a melody to their take on black metal. So what I like about this is the extra symphonic bits. I think they're getting me through it in a way. If it had just been blast beats and shrieking for 40 minutes, it would have been like, fuck's sake, this is a bit much.
I've got to say as well, there are moments on this record where... So we should talk about the lineup of Emperor, actually. We haven't spoken about the people involved. So the lead vocalist and guitarist is a gentleman called Ihsan, who I was...
Or insane, I usually just call him because it's easier.
So I'm actually quite familiar with him because he's had quite a successful solo career, and he's kind of gone more atmospheric and more... ambient almost with a lot of his solo material, but he does still meld it with black metal. And his the other guitarist in Emperor is a guy called Samoth, and I think Ihsan and Samoth are the only two original members that have maintained the entire lineup for the band's career. There is a gentleman called Alva playing bass on this, even though you can't hear him. when you do hear him, though, you do realise that he is using quite a sort of light sort of sounding distortion, makes the bass sound very sort of thin and clangy, which is why he kind of gets buried in the mix. And then the drummer at this time is a chap called Trim, who is doing just an inordinate amount of work on this record. Incredible drummer, honestly. It's so intense the entire time. Doesn't miss a beat. I don't know how many takes this would have taken, but honestly, it's just an amazing performance the entire time. But I wanted to talk about...
The drumming's great, and I think it gets more interesting later in the album as well. Like we said, that the front half is kind of laden with the intensity and also a lot of the blast beats, and I think as you go further into the album, the drums open up a bit and get a bit more groovy and interesting. Absolutely. Which I really liked.
The only reason I wanted to bring up the lineup in particular, because Ihsan's vocals, regardless of the fact that he's using quite a lot of screaming throughout the entire record, he does scatter throughout certain songs a bit of singing, and he's got a very sort of bombastic, dramatic vocal style.
Yeah, it's kind of like dramatic baritone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoy it when it comes in, because it breaks it up a bit and gives it some sort of variety that helps, it not feel like such a massive bombardment. So
it's a good track.
Yes, absolutely. Really, really enjoyed this one as well. We get go further into the symphonic drama of this record with the next track, which is Ensorcelled by Chaos. K, obviously. I absolutely.
What does it ensorcelled mean?
Yeah, I don't
Does it
know.
mean that? Does it mean like surrounded?
I
or
guess,
does it mean
but
that
like
a sorcerer has like
a sorcerer
cast
has
a
like
spell? Who
yeah,
knows?
that's what I was thinking. I'm assuming, but yeah, it certainly sounds dramatic.
It's a good. Like if somebody said, "What does it sound? What does this album sound like?" I'd say "Ensorcelled" by K.
Oh mate, I absolutely love the riff at the start of this song. Really evil sounding riff. This one, like you actually get to appreciate the guitar work a little bit because it's not just all tremolo picked for once. There's a moment around 134 where you get these really sort of silly sort of oompa like strings, and I was just like, this album just continues to surprise me. I love it. Very overblown. Yeah, again, but like it's just played so straight down the middle that I can't help but love it because it's like these guys clearly believe in what they're doing. You know, they're not playing this for giggles. It's just so fun, honestly. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well.
On this track, I wanted to come back to the symphonic bits.
Yeah.
And I think they work compositionally.
Yep.
So I think they fit the music.
Absolutely.
But they do sound a bit farty and MIDI-esque by today's
absolutely,
standards.
absolutely.
And I thought this would really benefit from like an S&M type thing.
Yeah.
With a full orchestral backing.
Oh, can you imagine?
And what's interesting is I have sitting next to me some birthday presents, one of which is the new Bury Tomorrow album, Cannibal, which is very good. The other one is the In Flames 20th anniversary of Clayman, which is a very controversial release because they've re-recorded some of the tracks in ways that I would consider questionable. So I'm not always one to go for remasterings and re-recordings of albums, and In Flames are probably a bad example of how to do it and why you probably shouldn't re-record. But I would be really interested to hear this with a proper orchestra because I think that would give the symphonic bits the attention and reverence. I guess no pun to the next song intended. That they deserve. Not to say it wasn't good, just that it's a little distracting by today's modern standards.
Absolutely, I feel
is that fair?
Yeah, no, completely. I feel like this was written with the limitations in mind. Almost, it's like this is what we had to do because we couldn't afford an orchestra, basically.
You could do it in a keyboard.
Yeah,
and you can program in the instruments, and it works. But it sounds like trumpets and strings being played in a keyboard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't sound like an actual brass section.
Yeah. And if you can look past that and appreciate the composition, then it's fine, honestly. But at the same time, I think because it sounds silly, I was also enjoying it. It's a bit like that's so bad, it's so good. So there's a little bit of that about it as well. But another great track as far as I'm concerned. Oh, honestly, I'm just really enjoyed this record.
Just having a blast here. There's a bit. The only other thing I have in mind is that the big riff scramble at the end is good in this track.
Yep.
Trying to find it where it is. I think it's just sort of around the 5-minute mark.
Oh, mate.
When you get that.
Oh, yeah.
It's very like.
Definitely. I think as well. This was about the
riff
point.
Sandwich. That
this was about the point. Whilst I was listening to this for the first time, that I went on Discogs and basically bought a copy. So that arrived yesterday, and that's straight on my iPod.
So how have you been listening to it? You just been streaming it?
So initially, I did, the naughty thing.
Oh no! I would certainly never do that.
And downloaded it, but then I bought it, so it's all good, right?
That's what they always say that piracy is good for.
Yeah, completely.
See, I just stream everything now. I just stream everything in Apple Music, and I go through like I don't know, 5 or 6 albums a day. So I really do get my money worth on it.
Yeah, no, I've never adopted streaming, unfortunately. And you've seen my record collection. I'm very much a man who likes to put a CD on or a record. Or yeah,
I have seen your record collection. I've actually got speaking of collections. One of the side. This is like absolutely nothing to do with this band or even music.
Go on.
It's just a nice little interlude in the middle of the podcast. So one of the side effects of the coronavirus pandemic is that international shipping has been really heavily disrupted.
Yeah.
And I currently have about 200 to 300 classic video games coming across on a boat from the UK to Australia.
Okay.
And so my entire Mega Drive and Saturn and Dreamcast collection's coming over, and I have no idea where it's going to go in my house, but I think I'm going to need some Lewis floor-to-ceiling shelves.
Very important, very important.
But you can see here you can see the background here. I've got.
I can. The listeners can't.
Yeah, you can. I'll surely there's a way to take a. I'll take a selfie and put it on the website. But I have very few CDs.
Yep.
I only have ones that people have really gifted me around the time. So I've got. Looking at the wall, we've got some Arion, we've got some Alter Bridge, got a Bellacore album.
Yep.
Got pretty much the entire Tool discography because you couldn't stream them.
Yep.
Got a bit of Soil Work, bit of Rise to Fall. Mostly things Daniel's purchased for me for birthday presents. That's a good album. Got Hypocrisy's A Taste of Extreme Divinity. That is, I'll have to do that sometime. That's a hell of an album. Yeah, I just stream everything, but it was good I could find this. But because one of the problems is, and it seems to be, music from that part of the world at this time, it can be quite hard to find older albums.
Yeah.
And with the most recent ones, they all seem to have the right major label support or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is hard to find older, more obscure albums, even like from big name bands.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Some of the Soil Work discography, their back catalogue seems to be really hard to find.
It is strange what is on these services and what isn't. So yeah.
Or I know what it was. It was Mors Principium Est, who are they're a Finnish melodeath band. They've got a new album coming out, and you can only get their new one that's coming out and the previous one to that on streaming.
Yep.
Can't get their last couple of major releases, which is really annoying because it's got some killer tracks on that.
Yeah.
And because they're quite obscure, you can't torrent them either.
Yeah, well, this is it.
So what do you meant to do? I can't really get Finnish music over to Australia right now. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Anyway, that's the end of that. That's the end of that interlude. Don't steal music, kids.
Yeah. Well,
I thought you would have listened to this on tape. I think it was a good cassette album.
I just went for what was cheapest, and it was the CD. I prefer CDs. You can rip them. It's easy. So yeah, I mean, I did try and stream it initially, and it is on Spotify. All of Emperor's back catalogue is on Spotify, which is a bit strange to think of. It's like, there's black metal on Spotify. It's really strange. But yeah, it was there, but then I've only got Spotify free, so I like halfway through the record I have to listen to a fucking advert. So yeah, it's just not the way to listen to music. So I was just like, I'll just download it. And it was great, so I bought it. So it's all good. It all worked out in the end. Anyway, let's move on.
Earned themselves a sale.
Absolutely.
I think we should probably do. I'm sure we could do an episode on history of music piracy and how our entire collections were pretty much stolen. Whenever we first got into music. But no, it's an important way to get in. That's the great thing about streaming now. Is you can use Spotify free and or YouTube. And listen to whatever you want for free with only appalling adverts for fast food joints every couple of minutes within the song.
Okay.
So the next track, to get back on topic, damn it, back on topic. This one is the Loss and Curse of Reverence. So this one is much more melodic.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I think this is where we get into the more experimental stuff by Emperor standards.
Yeah. So we kick off with another tremolo pick riff at the start, which obviously instantly gets me on board because I love me some tremolo picking. Then it starts off more sort of traditional sort of metal drumming before it changes to blast beats. Then we get this sort of ethereal, ghostly wailing on this one, which I really quite like. Lots of atmosphere on this track.
There's quite a lot of like choral bits in this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, and I think again the choral elements are all done like keyboard sampling and stuff like that. But like it's again compositionally, I liked it really. I think it works really well. It adds some drama to the song, and yeah, that sort of middle eight, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's not really a traditional middle eight structure, but like it's a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit more just considered, I suppose, instead of just being like 100 miles an hour the entire time. About 4 minutes 26 is when it sort of shifts back to being more traditional black metal with its blast beats and the tremolo picking and everything. There's a really sort of like chaotic, noisy guitar solo on this one, which I really, really enjoyed. Very sort of Slayer, very atonal and crazy. So yeah, that was really nice to hear as well. Again, just considering how intense and chaotic this is, it doesn't have a lot of ideas. Considering honestly, there's so much variety in and amongst the chaos that again, you have to sit down and give it your attention to pick it out. But if you do give it your attention, I think you're going to come away with a really just positive listening experience. Well, positive is such that you can appreciate the music. It is crazy and chaotic and dark as thematically, But just what another great song.
I think there's definitely a lot more choral and symphonic stuff going in here.
Yeah.
This one to me feels like it has more of a tune to it.
Yeah.
And more of a groove. Like it's got that wow kind of noise that comes back again and again.
Absolutely.
Again, the symphonic elements do have that Casio keyboard 90s Sega soundtrack vibe to it. If you're like, what the hell is that reference? That's a specific reference to the Super Hang-On 20th Anniversary soundtrack, which has very similar keyboards, but that's a 1989 game.
Absolutely.
So that's okay. But that's what it reminds you of. It's good of, would you say it's fair, that Casio keyboard sound?
No, definitely. Oh,
and I really like the Casio keyboard sound,
Yeah.
and again, this adds a bit of cheesiness to it.
Yep.
That is quite welcome.
It's a bit of levity to a very dark and abrasive record. So yeah, absolutely.
But you've got everything in this. You've got wild guitar solos, a pretty crazy finish. You've got insane shouting, just sort of randomly bellowing in the middle of the track.
Absolutely.
It's got it all.
Oh,
got it all.
Really, really enjoyed this again. Like, I don't think there's a moment on this album where I wasn't just having a great time.
But as you say, it demands considered listening.
Yeah, definitely. You need concentration. You need to, like the way I did it, you need to sit down, put it on, like it's the only thing you're doing tonight is listening to this record. And just giving it your attention, because otherwise it's just gonna be noise and like intrusive, and it's not the sort of way it needs to be. You need to give it attention, because there was just so much going on. Okay, let's move on to track 6, which is the acclamation of Bonds. Not James Bond's, but
insert your Alan Partridge reference here.
I mean, there's certainly some drama and some faux strings on this, but it's not the sort of Bond theme that you're expecting. I again, really big dramatic intro.
What an opening! What an opening lick!
I love it. Really good stuff.
This is so. It sounds like Van Halen-esque hammering at the start of this one. It's very
really
old school metal feel.
Absolutely. It soon breaks out into more exhausting speed, though.
It reminded me a bit of For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica.
Definitely.
And then
similar sort of atmosphere, absolutely.
But even that riff is not too dissimilar to the.
I can see where you're going with that.
That's where I was coming from with that one.
Absolutely.
But then, as you say, back to the blast beats and the chaos within 30 seconds. That's enough of that.
Yeah, but again, we do get more of the sort of symphonic elements in that they're using this sort of like sample digitized string sound on this track. This one in particular, I felt was so noisy and chaotic that there's almost like barely any sort of melody to discern on this one. You really, again, you had to really sort of give it your attention to sort of like hone in on licks and, you know, grooves and things like that, because it's just so crazy. Like there's so much happening at any given point, such a big wall of noise. But it's just such a unparalleled atmosphere.
There's a lot of wailing guitar solos and bits and bobs, because it's just all over the place.
Absolutely.
Do you know that? So as I was listening to this, I kind of wrote down earlier in the song, this reminds me of "For Whom the Bell Tolls."
Yeah.
And then it didn't. And then at the end, there's a bell tolling, and a very similar riff to "For Whom the Bell Tolls." Like you knew that sounded similar.
Oh. I mean, look, I'm not being funny, but like. Even late 90s when this came out, which was, I think it's 97, so much of metal owes so much to Metallica. There's no way around it, you know, regardless of whether you're the most true like necro black metal band that exists in the world.
Cult with a K and a V.
Yeah, exactly. There's no escaping it. You can't not owe something back to bands like Metallica, which are so now massively influential to the genre, you know, as a whole.
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying if they are deliberately calling back to "For Whom the Bell Tolls," good for them. That's what I was saying.
I think as well, it's worth mentioning. I think at this point, if this album you haven't found something to like about it, it's probably not going to win you over because there is a very like tried and tested formula that runs throughout this entire record, and it is fast, unrelenting, like underproduced, no bass, screamy, and it's intense, and you need to give it your attention. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be a bit of a barrier for a lot of people. I know that this genre is not for everyone, and I know it's a difficult thing to approach right off the bat. If you never listen to any heavy music or any black metal, this is going to be a testing experience, I think. And I felt like there was very little moments on this entire record where it really gave you any sort of respite or like a melody or a groove to really like sink into and headbang to. It's not that sort of music. It's just intense and quick the entire time. And if that sounds appealing to you, then you're probably going to like this. But I think also it's going to be a barrier for a lot of people. I think if you want your metal with a little bit more melody, this is probably not going to grab you in the same way. I think you're going to need to have some sort of expectation going into this that it's a little bit more difficult to approach. I think it's an acquired taste. Let's put it that way.
And yet, even though I agree with pretty much all you've said, the last track, the last main track, "With Strength I Burn,"
yeah.
is essentially easy listening by this album standards.
Absolutely.
It's almost a black metal ballad.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a slow song by any stretch of the imagination, but I suppose this is about as mid-paced as Emperor get, I guess. There's a lot more groove to this. There's a lot more melody. I really liked this, but it's so different to everything that's come before it, apart from maybe the intro, that it really stands alone, and it shows that Emperor have a little bit more to their ability and their chops than just simply going hell for leather for an entire record. 1 minute 50, we get Isan's really lovely baritone singing, which I really enjoyed. It's good. It really adds to the drama. Like it's a fantastic addition to their atmosphere that they create. It doesn't have the same dynamism or the chaotic energy as the other songs, but I don't think that's a fault by any means of this song. I think it offers something a little bit different and showcases that the band can do more than just go nuts. It's just really, really good. Proper sort of mid-paced Emperor groover. Good stuff. I mean, like, around the end of the song, about 5 minutes 40, it does pick up some pace again, and that gets that craziness back and sort of ends the record on that chaotic energy again. But the only thing I'd say against it is I think it probably doesn't have enough ideas to justify its length. I think at 8 minutes...
8 minutes plus, isn't it?
Yeah, at 8 minutes, it's definitely a little bit too long in the tooth. But I enjoyed what it was doing and what it was offering, and it was so different to what everything else on the record. I couldn't help but take notice, to be honest with you. It's a real good album closer. And it's not really the album closer. Obviously, we get The Wanderer, which is the final track on this.
Kind of spooky instrumental.
Yeah,
I'd called it an interlude, and then I realized that there were bonus tracks, and I was like, oh, okay, it's actually an outro. That makes much more sense.
I did enjoy The Wanderer, though. I think it's got a really lovely groove and a nice melody, really strong lead guitar melody. And unlike the intro, it's actually backed with the proper rhythm section. It's got drums and... Yeah, I just thought it was a nice dramatic close to the record, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the Wanderer, those sort of reverberant guitar tones remind me a bit of like shoegaze, which I'll definitely come to in the further listening, because there's an interesting diversion, but that not by no means a bad finish.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I didn't make any notes for the bonus tracks, even though I have listened to them. But obviously, you dived into them as well.
Well, I wouldn't give. I have notes. I just don't have a huge number of notes.
Yeah.
So there are 2 extra tracks, and if you're listening along at home, you probably won't realize they're bonus tracks because they don't seem to be labeled as such.
Yeah.
As opposed to the live version of Lost in Cursive Reverence, which is obviously a bonus track.
Yeah.
So the first one's called In Longing Spirit, which is totally different to anything else in the album. So it was a bit confusing at first, but it makes sense as a bonus track. We've got organs. We've got a bit of a drum groove here.
Yeah.
And it's quite a doomy riff to it.
Absolutely.
It's very different to the rest of the album.
Yeah. It's a very good song as well. Honestly, like it deserves a listen. If you've enjoyed the rest of the record, it's well worth checking out because again, it shows that there's more to Emperor than just what they've offered through most of this album in particular. But like honestly, it's a nice change of pace, a little bit more variety.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that it wasn't part of the original album.
Yeah, no, definitely,
it's really good.
But yeah.
And then 2/3 in, you get this mega breakdown with lots of shredding and proper galloping drums.
Yeah, no, it's really good fun.
So instead of blast beats, see, I describe them as galloping, like kind of.
Yeah, no, definitely
not quite Maiden-esque, much faster than that, but it's good. Just more relentless traditional drumming. Yeah. And I mean, we haven't mentioned it, but there is some variety to the drumming on this. It isn't just blast beats the entire time. They do actually use quite a lot of sort of death metal style double bass drumming as well, which helps emphasize certain grooves and licks, I think. But yeah, it's still obviously very intense, but there is some variety to the overall experience when on the drum side of things as well. But yeah, that song in particular, definitely the most experimental when it comes to the drums, I think. Offers a lot more than what you've experienced with the rest of the record. And then there's a instrumental version of a track of their first album, isn't it, as well? Yeah, and it sounds a bit like if you've listened to the first Black Mages album.
Yeah, it's very video gamey. Yeah, it's all sort of like keyboard led, isn't it? It's there's not really much in the way of guitars and things like that.
Yeah,
to it.
it's just a what is it saying? Oh, I've actually got some liner notes on the Apple Music lyrics page.
Yeah.
It was originally featured in the Nightside Eclipse album under the title Inno a Satana, and it's a classical arrangement and performance by Izan.
Yeah, but yeah, it's all done on synthesizer or keyboard and things like that. So yeah, it's.
But it does sound very like 1990s Final Fantasy.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, and then outside of that, there's obviously just a live rendition of the Lost of Reverence. It's a good version, but their live setting, I don't think really gives it the quality it deserves. To be honest with you, the drums are actually quite buried, and I think it's because they're so quick. I can't imagine you can really hit that hard for that long. It's almost like tapping instead of actual drumming, to be honest, which is a bit of a shame.
I've just got it on the background now.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It doesn't quite have the prominence that the album production has, but yeah, overall, I've got to say, I came away from this having one of the best times I've ever had on this podcast. Especially after last episode where we were all revved up and ready to have a good time with some power metal, and then it ended up kind of disappointing us a little bit. To go into this and to just have it tear my face off from front to end and just have the best time, I was just, this is exactly what I wanted. So yeah, first impressions on Emperor are fantastic. I think they're a band I'm going to explore further after listening to this record. I really, really enjoyed my time with this, and I've heard lots of good things about other records in their discography as well, so I think I'm definitely going to have to explore them a little further. How about you, Alan?
So I have finally found the best way to listen to black metal.
Okay.
And so it's not going for a run.
Yep.
It's not driving home in the car. It is vacuuming and housework. And so I came home yesterday and I wanted to give it a final blast, and I had to vacuum the car.
Yep.
And I usually do housework to like Dream Theater or something.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
usually prog metal. But black metal works really well because there's not much of a bass, and the bass frequencies get cut out when you're vacuuming anyway. So it actually is, and because you're not doing anything else except for dull mechanical work.
Yep.
So it'd be really good for I don't know, mowing the lawn or doing yard work or hanging out washing or anything else where you'd probably listen to a podcast.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
So I have now, and I was chopping vegetables to the Apple Music Black Metal Essentials playlist last night, and that worked quite well. So I'm going to now listen to black metal whenever I do housework, because it seems like it's the only way I can give it proper attention. I bounced off this at first, and
I had a feeling you
like,
might.
what?
Yeah,
and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is nuts. But then the more time I gave it and the more repeated plays, so actually I think it's probably the most times I've listened to something before we've done an episode. I've been through it about 4 or 5 times back to front and properly listened to it.
Yeah.
But it really grew on me, and I'm definitely interested to listen around some more of the genre. So this is the other apologies to Paul bit, as I was listening to a bit of Immortal this morning, and I will definitely be listening to more after this.
Oh, good stuff.
So I think it's really good. It was a really good choice of album.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Big thanks to Paul, actually, for introducing this one to me.
We've got this initial wall of noise and genre that you have to get through, but actually it's not that bad once you're into it.
No.
The challenging bit is that there isn't that verse chorus verse structure, and the problem is whenever you're guys who decided for better or worse to do a heavy metal podcast where we go through track by track, it makes it hard for us to say things about individual tracks, but that's more a feeling of our format than the album itself.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And this is one of those albums where it's more like one big movement.
Yep.
It's more like one big vibe. There's a couple of bits we can pick out here and there through the tracks, but really it's about the overall vibe. And the overall vibe I got was, this is good. This is an experience. It's something to sit down with your favorite beverage, in a darkened room and enjoy.
Yeah.
But it's just, and it needs that because it doesn't have the more melodic bits. So something like Bellacore, right? Is we covered we covered Vessels, which is an album that again doesn't have a verse chorus verse structure at all, but it does have a lot of melody, and it has a lot of tunes and riffs and things that you can hook into your brain more quickly to identify each track to the next.
You settle into a groove,
and this doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference, is you need to sit down and give it your attention.
Yeah.
And if you're recording a podcast episode on it, you're going to need to get the track listings up and make notes.
There you go.
But I really enjoyed it, and I think it was a bit of an eye opener for me.
Yeah.
It was a genre that I hadn't given full attention to before, so it was a real treat actually to. It was the opposite of last episode, isn't it? We were excited and came out feeling a little bit dejected. This one went in feeling a little bit, oh my god, and came out really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
The wife wasn't convinced, but that's okay. It's not for everybody.
No, absolutely, and that is the thing with black metal, is it is not going to be for everybody. I think you do have to take some reservations in when you go into these sort of things and understand what you're going to get yourself in for. But honestly, if any of that sounded interesting, I think it's worth exploring, because I think this is an absolutely fantastic record. Definitely deserves the plaudits. I think it's earned over its time in the sun. So I've really enjoyed my time with this. Had a great time. I don't know if I could pick a favorite track.
So that's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, I think, and this is purely based on the conversation we just had, I'm going to say your favorite sounded like it was the Entrance Imperium, merely because it melted your face immediately.
Yeah, I think it definitely left the biggest impression, because, well, I mean, it's the first proper song on the record, and I was just, oh, okay, where's this been all my life? So I think you're probably right. And if I was going to guess one for you, I think maybe With Strength I Burn.
I think that one definitely wouldn't be my favorite.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But I think my favorite is probably either Lost in Cursive Reverence or The Acclamation of Bonds.
Oh, fair enough.
And I think for the latter, mainly because I really like it, because it reminded me of Van Halen.
Yeah.
But I like Loss of Curse and Reverence because it reminded me of Sega 1990 soundtrack. So it did have that Sega Rally Super Hang-On arrangement feel to it, which I really like. But it did make me miss my Saturn and think about the poor Saturn coming across in a shipping container. Is it going to be okay?
Oh man!
So I think those are probably my favorites. And actually, if you're somebody like me who this doesn't naturally appeal to, those might be good starting points.
Yeah. No, there you go.
Even if you're like, oh my god, I can't take the first track, try dipping into some of the later tracks and then coming back to it.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea actually, definitely, because it, like you say, very front loaded. The change in pace at the end of the record might be something that appeals to you. So yeah. In regards to extra listening, then I have picked 2 black metal records that I have familiarity with. The first is In Sorta Diaboli by Dimmu Borgir, who I have some experience with. They are more symphonic than they are black metal, but I think In Sorta Diaboli is the one that leans quite heavily on black metal. It is a very heavy record with lovely, bombastic, stupid orchestral moments. Very pompous, very overblown, a lot of fun, and I think it's quite a natural follow-up to a record like this. It basically is very much doing what this is doing, but probably with quite considerably higher production values.
Yeah,
so,
I listened to a little bit of Dimmu Borgir, but not in depth.
Yeah.
It's definitely got a lot more, like they're really bringing them symphonic elements to the forefront.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then the other record I wanted to recommend is a much more recent record, one of my favourites from recent years. It is an album called The Great Mortality, and it is by a British black metal band called The Infernal Sea. Oh my god, what a great record. If you want what this is doing, but with riffs and grooves and just... I often hear the term sort of death and roll thrown around when it comes to Infernal Sea, and yeah, they are a great band. Lots of high-pitched, raspy, screaming vocals. It's lots of black metal tropes all over this, in tremolo picks, riffs, and blast beats and things like that. But there are a considerable amount more grooves and riffs and things for you to really sink your teeth into. It is one of my favourite records of recent years, and I would highly, highly recommend it if you have any inclination to check out black metal with some groove, I guess. So yeah. Alan, then, further listening on your part.
Well, I'm going to frantically change my mind at the last minute because I just remembered a good recommendation for a vaguely black metal-esque album. So
okay.
I'm gonna list three and be a pain.
Okay.
So the first one is actually by Isan, which is his most recent album. It's called Amr. So that's Agrav MR, which is a really interesting progression from some of the stuff you'll hear in Emperor. Yep. It's got the intense black metal-y bits, but it's also got sort of post-metal, more instrumental, electronic influences, and it's a really interesting record. So I've got two other recommendations, which are kind of but not quite black metal, but they're bands and albums I've really enjoyed. So the first is by a band called Alcest, and that album is called Kodama. So Alcest are essentially a solo project. They're a French band.
Yep.
And it's known as a black gaze. So it's essentially black metal mixed with some of those shimmering bits that we picked up in this, actually.
Yeah.
So like the shimmery bits of The Wanderer, but it's but it's sort of shoegaze mixed with black metal.
Absolutely.
So it's really interesting, atmospheric stuff, and it's got everything you want: interesting tunes, nonsense vocals. What more could you want? But a really weird and really interesting album. So the other one. I don't know if you heard of this one. It's a band called Zeal and Ardor, and the album's called Stranger Fruit.
Yeah.
And I just remembered, oh my God, we have to talk about this because this is black metal mixed with African soul music.
Yeah. It is quite crazy. I don't know if it's ever really clicked with me, to be honest with you. I have tried Zeal and Ardor, and I think it is quite an acquired taste. I love what they're doing. I love me some genre fusion. I've got nothing against that. But I don't know if it's really quite clicked with me in the way I would like to. It's, very different, very unique, very original. And those are all positive things, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't quite tick my boxes. I don't know. I want it to be heavier.
I'm recommending it not because I think that it's absolutely amazing, and I know what you mean. It doesn't quite click with me either. More just because I think it's so interesting.
Yeah.
As a fusion of musical styles that it's worth listening to.
Absolutely.
To unpick and understand how black metal can mash with other things in interesting ways. And I mean, there's other bands out there, like there's sort of an American metal revival of, I don't know what you'd call them, critically favoured metal bands, like Zeal and Ardor. Another one would be like Death Heaven.
Yep, absolutely.
Who have a lot of black metal influences in their music, but yet while I've enjoyed some of the Death Heaven I've listened to, I thought, this isn't quite hitting the mark for me.
Okay.
Not like, what do you think?
I've really enjoyed Sunbather. I think that's a really great record.
I like Sunbather, but I didn't really. The one after it, whatever it was called, didn't really click with me.
I haven't explored the other ones after, and I just haven't heard. I just haven't heard anything as strong and as like overtly you need to listen to this as everybody was with Sunbather. So I haven't really gravitated to them as much as I did Sunbather, but I really did enjoy Sunbather, and again, like your initial recommendation there, it's got that sort of black gaze sort of feel to it as well. Great record.
That was some interesting recommendations, and probably something we should, do in a further episode. Anyway.
Completely.
So, if you've enjoyed this, and hopefully you do, because it's episode 20, so you've suffered long enough. If you've listened to 20 and didn't enjoy it, feel free to stop. So you can find us in castironshow.co.uk, where you'll find the entire back catalogue. You can probably contact us through there. I haven't built the contact form yet. We should probably have that. If you got a recommendation for an album, you can hit Lewis up on Twitter, or you can contact us via the website, and we will take it under consideration.
Yeah.
This episode is a very special thanks to Paul Williamson, who said we should do some black metal.
Absolutely.
Give us some album titles, and we picked
Thank
this
you
one.
so much, Paul.
Hopefully we have not disappointed him.
No. Well, he certainly didn't disappoint me, because that was an amazing choice. Obviously make sure you follow us on the socials. We are on Cast Iron Show on Facebook, Cast Iron Show on Twitter, Instagram as well. Been really enjoying getting back into the swing of things with that. I've been sharing what I've been listening to recently, so please go and follow us on there. Obviously, if you want to follow me directly, it's at Sonic Yoda. So please have a chat and give us some recommendations. It'd be lovely to hit some more bases on subgenres that we haven't quite got to yet on Cast Iron Show, because that has been very much my leaning at the moment, and I think that's why we did this, because we hadn't touched on black metal, and that's quite important.
I think what I'm going to do is, after this, I'm going to go back to the old cast iron spreadsheet where we 4 years ago dumped all the albums we wanted to cover, and I'm going to try and do like a pivot table of genres, so we can make sure we head a bit wider.
Oh, that's very you, Alan, isn't it?
That's very it's a very me. It's a very very Alan and Craig approach. If you've ever seen his games he's completed spreadsheet, that was like the genre, how long it took him to complete on a platform.
God.
But I just because otherwise it will come back to all the things that I usually listen to, and that's why it's...
This is it. And I'm glad we got out of our comfort zone a little bit for this.
Go away, Siri. Sorry. I must have seriously said something and my watch picked up on it. My bad.
But yeah, no, I'm glad we got out of our comfort zone a little bit for this episode, because it was a really nice surprise, and it's introduced me to something I will definitely be returning to quite frequently. So fantastic recommendation, Paul, as per usual. So good stuff. Thank you very much, as always, for listening. Castironshow.co.uk for all the information.
Hey, don't forget to review us on iTunes. That matters, apparently. That actually matters.
Review us on Apple Podcasts, I'll have you know. iTunes does not
yes,
exist
sorry.
anymore.
I should know that, since my computer no longer has iTunes. It only has music and podcasts and things.
But obviously you can get us from all good podcatching apps, so please go and
feel free to
subscribe
download this podcast and share it with your friends. copy it on the cassette or burn a CD.
It's what I would do, right? Oh dear. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, as always. This has been an absolute pleasure. Good to hear from you again, Alan, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Yeah, you too. Oh, lovely morning.
Oh, yes.
Strange time zone paradox that we're in. Yeah, catch you later.
Take care.